Our film starts in Mexico City, where a group of guys working on the excavation of an ancient burial ground are looking for well-preserved mummified bodies for a museum. They go to open one of the coffins and the lid blows off. As they sneak in for a look, they find a very lifelike woman. They freak as she opens her eyes and see her fangs out. She leaves the area, and as she walks around, she struggles to understand the modern society she has awakened to. Eventually, she ends up at a blood bank and kind of freaks out when she sees the date on the paperwork, and then again when she sees a bug. She then passes out in the lobby when she's told that she doesn't get blood from a blood bank, she gives it. Back at the gravesite, we see a vampire find the empty coffin of the blonde woman and happily explains that his bride is back. We then see the woman at a hospital with an IV in her arm. She's getting a blood transfusion as the doctors ask her about her medical history. She's still confused about how blood banks work, as is the doctor on the fact that she's explained that she's a vampire and not suffering from a blood disease. The doctor, whose name is David, takes a special interest in the woman. After the woman leaves the hospital, she pawns off her medallion and uses the money to purchase a property with modern amenities. A woman comes in who claims to be the maid who comes with the apartment. The woman explains to the maid Rosa her unusual habits, which the maid laughs off until she sees a refrigerator full of blood. Back at the hospital, as she's getting her latest transfusion, Dr. David asks her out. While this is happening, the male vampire heads to the woman whose name is Angelique's apartment. He ends up getting the maid instead, who basically tells him off. She finally gets him to leave by putting a speaker next to the intercom system and playing loud salsa music. On their date, Angelique explains to David that she left England to get away from the vampire whose name is Vlad because he was evil. She then outs David as only being interested in her because of her condition. She is then comforted at the fact that he is not afraid of her, still not understanding that he thinks that she is sick and not understanding that she's a vampire. After another freak out from seeing a bug, David falls into the water. She later explains on their walk back that she has a phobia of bugs from them crawling on her after being buried alive. He ends up cutting himself, opening the door for her, and we then get to see the stereotypical vampire going to town on someone's finger routine. They begin to make out, but she walks away before it gets too far and her hunger takes over. We then see that a very angry Vlad saw the whole thing. As she wakes up from her sleep, Vlad appears behind her coffin with her medallion, which he retrieves. She tries to explain that she wants nothing to do with him, but he explains how upset he is with her and how he basically spent the last century killing women for not being her. She tells him how happy she is currently and that she no longer has to kill for blood thanks to David. Vlad manhandles her for calling vampirism a disease and vows to make her face the fact that vampires have to kill and transfusions won't work, telling her that eventually she'll get so hungry she'll kill everyone around her. He eventually flies off when the maid Rosa shows up with a revolver. Back at David's lab, he gets paranoid and heads outside the office. That's when he sees Vlad staring at him. He ends up following Vlad for unknown reasons all the way to a dark room without working lights, but before he can walk in, Angelique shows up and passes out in his arms. David and the other doctor then discuss how with every transfusion she needs more and more blood, which concerns them. He decides to walk her home, but as they walk, she is very paranoid. She explains who Vlad is and points out that the two guys are following them. To figure out if it's true, Daniel takes her into a church. There she further explains the situation of Vlad and his vampires being like a cult that didn't want her to leave. As they leave the church, they sneak away as the two guys are distracted by women. She takes him back to her place and Rosa freaks out and points a cross at him, which Angelique makes her apologize for. Once she leaves, Angelique finally comes out as a vampire. He doesn't believe her and names a disease for every symptom that she has, except for immortality. They then sleep together in her coffin. As he leaves, Rosa gives him a bunch of vampire warding off items, which she forces him to take even though he doesn't want it. As he walks home, he feels he's being followed and heads to an empty building where he's attacked by Vlad. Vlad tells David that he doesn't plan on killing him, but instead will make Angelique do it when she loses her mind from hunger, and punish her by reburying her with his corpse. Back at the hospital, David is super excited to find someone with a more advanced version of the virus after the confrontation with Vlad. His rants make him sound ridiculously crazy until he shows the other doctor the blood he got from Vlad exploding in sunlight. Now both believe in vampires. Back at Angelique's place, she is starting to have nightmares from starvation with her fanging out and attacking Rosa. When she wakes up, she tells Rosa she's leaving and wants her to have the place. Rosa tries to get Angelique to stay, but instead freaks her out by talking about worms. When she goes after Angelique, Rosa's kidnapped by one of Vlad's goons. Meanwhile, the other one kidnaps David, but instead of taking him, bites him first. We then see Angelique try to bury herself in the tomb with a recently deceased 12-year-old, but Vlad finds her and takes her. After David wakes up from dreaming of a parody of a 1980s Bud Light commercial, he finds himself in a car going in circles in the middle of the desert. When he gets back to the hospital, he excitedly explains that he understands the blood isn't the thing that feeds the vampires, it's the epinephrine in the blood that does it, so giving Angelique blood laced with epinephrine should do the trick of preventing her from needing so many transfusions. Back in Vlad's, we see Angelique fanging out, losing her mind.
Miss Angelique, good to see you. You're feeling well this evening. Sorry to hear that.
He brings her Rosa, but when he thinks she's going to feed on her, she instead bites him. She then tells him no matter how mad she goes, she'll never love him. Back at the hospital, the doctors use UV light tubes to trap one of the vampires and convince them to say where Vlad is. As the guys head off there, a janitor accidentally turns the wrong switch back at the hospital, blowing up the vampire henchman. Back at Vlad's, he starts to take a liking to Rosa's snarky attitude and tells her that she would make a good monster and starts dancing with her. David says he'll go after Angelique while he tells the other doctor to cause a distraction. As he finds Angelique, he goes to inject her with the blood epinephrine combo, but she knocks it out of his hand and goes after him instead.
Okay, I mean, we'll relax, all right? Let's count backwards from 10. Ready? 10. I think we should relax. 9, join in any time. 8, 7, 6. We're not trying very hard.
He saves himself by feeding her a bug, which makes her pass out in disgust, allowing him to inject her. Back with the other doctor, his yelling distracts the other vampires, allowing Rosa to escape. He then gets confronted by the other henchmen, and when all the traditional vampire stuff doesn't work, he uses a UV light to blow the vampire's head up, before tossing him off a banister once he couldn't see, saving Rosa. Back at Angelique's dungeon, Vlad confronts David and the two fight, as David completely turns. Vlad gets the upper hand and feeds on David, which gives Angelique the time to drive a stake through his heart. The film ends with Rosa and Dr. Jose now being a couple, as well as Angelique and David talking about the lifestyle changes he'll have to make as a vampire couple. The last thing we see is the mummy of Vlad's staked corpse now in the museum, getting woken up after an earthquake. Thanks for watching. If you like this content, please leave a like and subscribe, and hit the bell icon to know every time I update. If you want to help my channel grow, please check out my Patreon, where you can get access to content early, as well as see the content that can't be uploaded here on YouTube. Link will be in the description. Until next time.